Welcome to Marple Whispers, where the quietest words carry the deadliest secrets. I'm Sean, and together we'll wander through drawing rooms, dark alleys, and dangerous whispers. Listen closely. Miss Marple is never wrong. In the misty heart of Little Chipping, where dollhouses whisper secrets and porcelain hides poison, Reginald Hargrove, eccentric collector of tiny worlds, meets a death too perfect to be chance. Sprawled amid his Regency masterpieces, one hand clutching at a toppled top-hatted figurine, his face frozen in serene surprise. Heart failure? Or a lover's touch laced with curare, the silent jungle dart that kills through skin? Enter Miss Jane Marple, the knitting sleuth with eyes like scalpels, unravelling a web of envy. A jealous rival's rattling parcel, a niece's fluttering tears, an iron aunt's hidden sketches, a suitor's forbidden lilies. Auctions echo grudges, wills bind hearts, and bare hands betray the fatal flaw. Who swapped the innocent rogue for a killer in miniature? As shadows lengthen in the parlour, one truth emerges. In dollhouses, as in life, the deadliest trap is the one you never see coming. Will Marple's needles pierce the lie before another tiny heart stops? Dive into murder in miniature, where every detail is a clue, and the killer's always the last you suspect. Chapter 1. The Dollhouse of Doom. The village of Little Chipping lay nestled in a fold of the downs, like a secret too precious to be shouted from the hilltops. It was the sort of place where time moved, at the pace of a grandfather clock, steady, unhurried, and occasionally prone to striking the wrong hour. Thatched cottages with doors painted in defiant shades of hollyhock pink and delphinium blue flanked the winding high street, where the air carried the mingled scents of baking bread from the post office tea room and wood smoke from hearths that had warmed generations. In autumn, when the leaves turned to flames upon the beaches, Little Chipping seemed almost enchanted, a watercolour sketch come to life. Yet beneath this idyll, as in all such villages, ran undercurrents of human frailty, whispers of old feuds, stolen glances, and ambitions as sharp as a hedgerow thorn. At the village's edge, where the lane climbed toward the manor house, stood Willowbrook Grange, a graceful Georgian pile with sash windows that blinked like knowing eyes upon the world. Its owner, Mr. Reginald Hargrove, was a figure as singular as his home. At 63, a widower these 10 years past, he had transformed from a middling solicitor in the nearby county town into a recluse of remarkable dedication. His late wife, Amelia, had once remarked, half in jest, half in despair, that Reggie treated his dollhouses with more affection than he ever spared for a ballroom. She had not been entirely wrong. Hargrove's collection, housed in the drawing room like a museum of arrested childhoods, numbered over 24 pieces. Victorian nurseries with cradles rocking in, perpetual silence, Tudor halls alive with minuscule suits of armour. Even a French chateau where tiny courtiers minced eternally in silk brocade. Each dollhouse was a triumph of the miniaturist's art. Walls papered in patterns no larger than a postage stamp, rugs woven finer than spider silk, and furniture that begged to be touched, caressed, possessed. It was this tactile intimacy that Hargrove craved above all. One must feel the grain of the wood, the chill of the porcelain, he would say to visitors, his voice dropping to a reverent hush, as his fingers, bare, always bare, traced the contours of a tiny four-poster bed. Gloves? Perish the thought. They were for butlers and bank clerks, not connoisseurs. His latest prize had arrived the previous afternoon by special carrier from a discreet auction house in Bond Street. A Regency townhouse, 3 stories of flawless stucco facade, complete with a servant's entrance and a mews stable harbouring coach and 4 in ivory and ebony. The packing case had borne the legend, "Fragile with care," but Hargrove had torn it open with the glee of a child at Yuletide. His eyes alight as he unpacked the inhabitants. A family of waxen figures, each posed in mid-gesture. The mistress at her embroidery hoop, the butler polishing silver that gleamed under an imaginary sun. That evening, as twilight bled into the downs and the first stars pricked the velvet sky, Hargrove had dined alone in the drawing-room. A cold collation of tongue and radishes forgotten on a side table. The gas lamps cast a warm conspiratorial glow over his labours. He hummed a fragment of Haydn as he positioned the tiny grand piano in the salon, its keys inlaid with mother-of-pearl. Atop the stool sat the gentleman in the top hat, a dapper soul with a waxed moustache and a quizzical tilt to his head, as if forever on the verge of proposing a quadrille. Hargrove's hand lingered on the figurine, adjusting its lapel with the delicacy of a surgeon. "There now, sir," he murmured, "you'll scandalize the dowagers no end." The clock on the mantel struck 10, and with a contented sigh, he rose, extinguishing the lamps one by one. The dollhouse stood sentinel in the gloom, its windows dark as secrets. Dawn came softly to Little Chipping, painting the thatch in hues of rose and gold. Mrs. Ethel Phipps, a stout widow of 50 with arms like hams and a tongue that could curdle milk, arrived at Willowbrook Grange precisely at 8, her basket laden with the makings of breakfast. She had kept house for Mr. Hargrove these 3 years, a post she regarded as light work for a widow's pension, dusting the gewgaws, boiling the kettle, and turning a blind eye to the master's peculiarities. "Them dollies," she would confide to her cronies at the Anchor and Plough, "they stare at a body something fierce. Give me the creeps, they do." But the wage was steady, and Hargrove was kindness itself, slipping her a shilling at Yuletide without a by your leave. This morning, however, the house felt oddly still, as if holding its breath. Mrs. Phipps clattered about the kitchen, setting the kettle to whistle and slicing bread with vigour. At 9:30, tray in hand, toast triangles crisp as autumn leaves, marmalade in a Wedgwood pot, and a pot of tea strong enough to wake the dead. She mounted the stairs to the drawing-room. The door stood ajar, as was Hargrove's custom. He liked the light to flood in, he said, to breathe life into the little one. She nudged it wider with her elbow, humming a snatch of Abide With Me to dispel the silence. The shriek that followed was prodigious, a banshee wail that rattled the casements and sent a brace of pigeons exploding from the eaves. The tray crashed to the floor in a wreckage of crockery and amber smears, and Mrs. Phipps staggered back, one hand clawing at her bosom, the other pointing like an accusing finger. There, amid the serried ranks of glass-fronted cases, lay Mr. Reginald Hargrove, sprawled on the Persian rug as if felled by an invisible hand. His head rested against the plinth of the new dollhouse, his face frozen in an expression of mild astonishment, as though he had glanced up mid-sentence to find a rude interruption. One arm was flung out, fingers splayed toward the Regency model, where a minuscule lace curtain hung askew. And there, inches from his grasp, lay the top-hatted gentleman, toppled face down upon the carpet like a casualty of some unseen skirmish. Mrs. Phipps's cries fetched the gardener from the potting shed, and, soon after, Constable Griggs, a ruddy-faced pillar of the village force, whose chief duties involved directing lost tourists and poaching pheasants from the squire's coverts. Griggs, panting from his bicycle ride, surveyed the scene with the air of a man who had stumbled into a dream. "Blimey," he muttered, tugging at his helmet strap. "Mr. Hargrove?" Dead as a doornail by the look of him. He poked gingerly at the body's shoulder with his baton. No response, save the faint rustle of Hargrove's velvet smoking jacket. The constable's gaze roved the room. The dollhouses serene in their cases, the air heavy with the scent of beeswax polish, and something sharper, almost acrid, like crushed almonds. Dr. Haydock arrived in his dog-cart 10 minutes later, his black bag swinging like a pendulum. A bluff man in his 60s, with a mane of silver hair and a moustache that drooped like a basset hound's ears, he had delivered half the village and buried the other half. Kneeling beside the body, he unbuttoned Hargrove's collar and pressed a stethoscope to the chest. The room fell silent save for the doctor's murmurings and the distant toll of the church bell marking the hour. "Heart, I'd wager," Haydock pronounced at last, rising with a creak of knees. "Instantaneous, no pain, thank the Lord. Poor chap must have keeled over arranging his toys. I'll write the certificate this afternoon." But it was the arrival of Inspector Dermot Craddock, summoned post-haste from market-basing headquarters, that lent the morning an edge of steel. Craddock, 42 and rising, cut a figure more fox-terrier than bloodhound. Lean, sharp-featured, with eyes the colour of storm clouds, and a briar pipe perpetually clenched between his teeth. He had made his name cracking the St. Mary Mead poisonings 2 summers prior, a case that still drew admiring nods in the canteen. Dismounting from his motor car with the briskness of a man allergic to dawdling, he ducked under the crime scene tape that Griggs had improvised from clothesline, and surveyed the drawing room like a general assessing a battlefield. "No signs of a break-in," Craddock noted crisply, his voice carrying the clipped tones of a Midlands grammar school. He circled the body, careful not to disturb the fallen figurine, which caught the light in a way that made its porcelain cheeks gleam unnaturally white. "Door was locked from inside, you say? And the maid, Mrs. Phipps, first on the scene?" Griggs nodded, mopping his brow. Craddock knelt, inhaling deeply through his nostrils. "The beeswax, yes, but that faint elusive tang persisted, teasing at memory like a half-forgotten scent from boyhood chemistry lessons." His eyes lingered on the dollhouses, rows of perfect worlds, undisturbed, mocking the chaos at their feet. "Queer business," he murmured, striking a match to his pipe. The flame danced briefly, illuminating Hargrove's serene features. A man drops dead in the heart of his kingdom, hand outstretched to his playthings. Almost poetic, wouldn't you say? Or perhaps too poetic by half. By noon, the news had slithered through Little Chipping faster than foxfire through a hedgerow. It reached the vicarage garden via the milkman, who had it from the postmistress, who had overheard Mrs. Phipps sobbing into her apron at the back door. There, amid the late-blooming asters and a stone bench, worn smooth by decades of confidences, sat Miss Jane Marple, 70-ish, pink-cheeked, with a crown of soft white hair that framed a face as guileless as a buttercup. She had come to the village a fortnight prior, at the behest of her dear friend Mrs. Simmons, The vicar's wife, whose rheumatism had rendered her garden parties a trifle lopsided. Miss Marple's hands, gnarled yet nimble, busied themselves with a pair of ivory needles, coaxing a pale blue shawl from a skein of Shetland wool. The rhythm was meditative, almost hypnotic, but her eyes, those mild china blue eyes that had unravelled more tangles than a fisherman's net, missed nothing. The flutter of a curtain in the breeze, the scurry of a vole beneath the laurels. "Oh, dear me," she said softly, as Mrs. Simmons, flushed from the kitchen, bore down with the tail clutched like a hot coal. The vicar's wife perched on the bench, fanning herself with a tea cosy. "Mr. Hargrove, such a tragedy, and in his drawing-room, you say, surrounded by those exquisite little houses of his." Miss Marple's needles paused, the wool trailing like a silken clue. She recalled Hargrove from the summer fete, the village green ablaze with bunting, trestle tables groaning under strawberry fools and Victoria sponges. He had presided over his stall like a benevolent monarch, inviting ladies to peer through magnifying glasses at his miniatures. "Look here, Miss Marple," he had urged, his voice quivering with zeal. "The scullery maid polishing the grate. See how the coal dust smudges her apron? Life in every cranny." She had smiled then, murmuring agreement, but her mind had wandered to St. Mary Mead, to a certain cottage where a jealous heart had hidden malice in a vase of lilies. "Peering into other people's secrets, isn't it?" Miss Marple observed now, her gaze drifting toward the distant silhouette of Willowbrook Grange, its chimneys etched against the sky like accusatory fingers. Those tiny rooms, so tidy and complete. One never knows what one might find lurking in the shadows. A misplaced letter in a desk drawer, perhaps, or a listener behind an arras. Mrs. Simmons shivered, despite the sun. Heart failure, the doctor says. But all alone like that. Eerie, don't you think? Miss Marple resumed her knitting, the needles clicking like castanets in a cautious tango. Eerie, yes, and yet human nature has a way of repeating its patterns, large or small. A dropped stitch here, a fatal oversight there. By luncheon, a cold ham salad in the vicarage dining room, she had formed her quiet resolve. A note to Mrs. Simmons's niece, Miss Laura Bentley, who kept house at the Grange. Sympathy, of course, but also an offer to call that very afternoon. "To lend an ear, dear," she would say, her smile as warm as hearth-fire. For in dollhouses, as in life, the most innocent facade often concealed the deadliest trapdoor. And so, as the church clock tolled one, Miss Marple set forth along the lane, her sensible brogues whispering over the gravel, her basket swinging with the weight of wool and intuition. Little Chipping slumbered on, oblivious to the storm gathering in its porcelain heart, but not for long. The game, as she well knew, had only just begun. Chapter 2. The Rivals and the Relics. The afternoon sun slanted through the leaded panes of Willowbrook Grange's drawing-room, like golden fingers probing for hidden compartments, casting elongated shadows across the Persian rug where, only hours before, Reginald Hargrove had drawn his last puzzled breath. Inspector Dermot Craddock stood at the centre of it all, his pipe sending lazy spirals of smoke toward the ceiling, where plaster cherubs gazed down with painted indifference. The room, for all its Georgian elegance, felt now like a stage set awaiting the curtain's fall. Every dollhouse a tableau vivant, frozen in mock domesticity. The air held a faint, cloying sweetness. as if the beeswax polish had absorbed the morning's tragedy and exhaled it in uneasy truce with the sharper undertone that Craddock could not quite place. A whiff of something tropical, forbidden. Craddock was not a man given to flights of fancy. His career had been forged in the grim forges of factory town murders and seaside drownings, where clues came blunt as a constable's truncheon. Yet here, in this sanctum of miniatures, he felt an unfamiliar prickle at the nape of his neck. Hargrove's body had been removed to the chilly embrace of Dr. Haydock's surgery, the rug rolled back to conceal the stain that was not blood, but the merest suggestion of spilled tea from Mrs. Phipps's ill-fated tray. The fallen figurine, that dapper gentleman in his top hat, reposed now in a twist of cotton wool within an evidence bag, its porcelain face turned sightlessly toward the light. Craddock eyed it thoughtfully. "Odd that," he said to Constable Griggs, who hovered like a faithful spaniel at his elbow. "The way it pitched forward, as if leaping to the rescue, or fleeing the scene." Griggs, whose imagination extended chiefly to the permutations of darts at the anchor and plough, scratched his chin. "Reckon the old boy knocked it over in his tumble, sir. Heart gives a flip, arm flails. Bob's your uncle." Perhaps. Craddock's tone was non-committal, his mind already mapping the terrain of inquiry. A natural death in a locked room was tidy. Too tidy, perhaps, for a man whose life was a mosaic of jealousies and triumphs. He turned to the desk, a mahogany behemoth scarred by years of absent-minded quill stabs, and rifled through the drawers with gloved hands. Ledgers of auctions, yellowed catalogues from Christie's and Sotheby's, a half-finished letter to a Parisian dealer, all spoke of a passion pursued with monastic fervour. No missives of acrimony, no veiled threats. Hargrove had been, it seemed, a collector without close kin to complicate the inheritance, save for a sister in distant Devon, and a niece under his roof. The niece. Craddock straightened, snapping shut the centre drawer with a decisive click. "Fetch Miss Bentley, Griggs. And mind you, tread softly. The girl's had a shock." Laura Bentley entered the drawing-room 5 minutes later. A vision of dishevelled fragility that might have melted a sterner heart than Craddock's. At 28, she was the sort of young woman who seemed perpetually on the verge of a swoon, fair hair escaping its pins in artful disarray, blue eyes wide and limpid as a summer pond, her figure swathed in a sprigged muslin that whispered with every tremulous step. She clutched a lace handkerchief to her lips, but her gaze darted about the room with the quickness of a sparrow, alighting on the dollhouses as if seeking reassurance from their unchanging order. "Miss Bentley," Craddock began, gesturing her to a chintz armchair by the window, "my deepest condolences. Your uncle was a fine man, by all accounts. I must ask a few questions if you feel equal to it. Pure routine, you understand." Laura sank into the chair, her skirts pooling like spilled milk. "Oh, Inspector! Reggie, Uncle Reggie, was more than fine. He was everything." A tear traced a glistening path down her cheek, absorbed swiftly by the handkerchief. This house, these little worlds of his, they were his joy, and mine, in a way. He taught me to see the beauty in the small things, you know. A tiny vase, a silk cushion no bigger than a thimble. Last night, he was so alive with it, the new dollhouse from London. He unpacked it himself after tea, chattering about the auction like a schoolboy. "Laura, my dear," he said, "this is the crown jewel. The figurines alone are worth a king's ransom." Craddock nodded sympathetically, his notebook flipping open like a conspirator's whisper. "And you saw him then?" "After tea, you mean?" "Yes, about 6:30. I was in the garden, weeding the rose border." The light was fading, but I could hear him through the open window, humming away. He called me in to admire the piano room. The salon, he called it. Such detail. The crystal chandelier catches the light like diamonds. And that gentleman at the keys. Her voice faltered, eyes flicking to the evidence bag on the side table. "The one that fell?" He was adjusting its hat, I think. Bare hands, as always. "Feel the glaze, Laura," he urged. "It's Bristol porcelain, cool as a summer dawn." I didn't stay long. Had to finish the bulbs before dark. But he seemed so happy, Inspector. Vital. Not a care in the world. Craddock jotted a note. Time, 6:30 p.m. Witness, niece, disposition, affectionate. Alibi, garden, visible. He glanced up. And after that? Did anyone call? Visitors? Laura's brow furrowed. A delicate crease, like a ripple on still water. "Mr. Thorne, Percival Thorne, from the cottage next door. He popped in around 7, I think. Borrowed one of Uncle's catalogues. Something about a Dutch auction. I let him in at the front. Uncle was still in here." They chatted for a bit, voices raised, but that's just collectors, isn't it? Passionate about their prizes. Voices raised. Craddock's pencil hovered. "Oh, nothing serious. Mr. Thorne can be a bit sharp. He and Uncle vied for pieces like knights at a tourney. But handshakes all round when Thorne left. Must have been before 8. I locked up then, had my cocoa in the kitchen. Uncle said good night from upstairs. I heard his door click at 10. Craddock made another note. Visitor, Thorne, 7 p.m. Purpose, catalogue. Demeanour, heated exchange. He closed the notebook with a snap that echoed like a judgment. "Thank you, Miss Bentley. You've been most helpful. We'll need to secure the house for a day or 2. Routine, as I said. Is there family we should notify? My aunt, Uncle's sister, Edith Hargrove. She's in Devon, headmistress at a girls' school there. Terribly brisk sort. Wires will fetch her quick as a shot. No one else, really. Mother and father gone these 5 years. Motor smash on the Exeter Road. Uncle took me in. God bless him." Fresh tears welled, and Laura dabbed at them with renewed vigour. "Will there be an inquest?" Dr. Haydock was so kind, but soon enough, Craddock assured her, rising. "Rest now. Griggs here will see to your needs." As Laura drifted from the room, supported by the constable's arm, Craddock turned back to the dollhouses, his reflection warped in their glass fronts. Passionate about their prizes. The phrase lingered, a thread begging to be pulled. Outside, the gravel crunched under Craddock's boots as he made for the neighbouring cottage. A thatched affair called Briar Patch. Its garden a riot of hollyhocks and larkspur that encroached upon the lane like eager gossip. Percival Thorne answered the knocker with the promptness of a man attuned to summonses, his wiry frame filling the doorway like a coiled spring. At 50, Thorne was a study in contrasts, face pinched as a winter apple, eyes darting like minnows in a brook, yet his attire, a tweed jacket of impeccable cut, cravat knotted with military precision, spoke of a pride that brooked no disarray. His antiquities shop in the High Street, the gilded trinket, dealt in curios from teapots to tapestries, but his true vice, like Hargrove's, was the miniature. Shelves in his parlour groaned under dollhouses of his own, lesser lights to Hargrove's constellations, but cherished with a fervour that bordered on the proprietary. "Inspector Craddock? Good heavens, this is about Reggie, isn't it?" Thorn's voice was a dry rustle, like pages turning in an ill-bound book. He stepped aside with a flourish that belied his agitation, ushering Craddock into a parlour where the air smelled of camphor and old varnish. A half-assembled dollhouse dominated the table, a Jacobean manor, its roof askew, tiny chimneys toppled like felled soldiers. "Dreadful news. I only saw him last evening. Fit as a fiddle we were. Come for a catalogue, you know. There's a sale in Amsterdam next month. Delft miniatures. Rare as hen's teeth." Craddock accepted a chair, declining the offer of sherry with a wave. "Yes, Miss Bentley mentioned your visit. Around 7, was it? Spot on. Stayed perhaps 20 minutes, enough to concede the field on that Regency beast he snagged in London. Outbid me by a pittance, the rascal. £50, I ask you." Thorn's laugh was a bark, devoid of mirth, his fingers drumming a tattoo on the armrest. "But that's the game, eh? Collector's blood runs hot. Reggie had the sharper eye, I'll grant him that. His collection, superb. The figurine that tumbled beside him? Part of the set, no doubt. Charming little chap, top hat at a rakish angle, moustache like a duelling scar. I admired it myself last night. Reggie was posing him at the piano. 'Thorn,' he says, 'this one's a devil for scandal. Eyes on the soprano across the room.' Craddock leaned forward, pipe forgotten. 'You handled it, then? The figurine?' Thorn blinked, a flicker of something wariness crossing his features. 'Handled? Good Lord, no. Reggie's the bare-handed sort. Swears by the boo. Touch me? Gloves always preserves the patina, you see. But I watched him fiddle with it, yes. Happy as Larry. And after you left? Alibi, Mr. Thorn? Where were you till bedtime? Here, of course. Solitary supper, cold chicken, a glass of claret. The postman waved good night at 8, saw me through the window puttering with this. He gestured to the incomplete manner. Then bed by 11, early night. That Amsterdam catalogue's a dry read. Craddock noted it all. Alibi. Self-corroborated. Postman witness. Verify demeanour. Evasive on handling. As he rose to depart, his eye caught a shelf of Thorn's miniatures. A Queen Anne rectory. Exquisite, but for a missing chimney pot. Fine work, these. Ever think of combining collections? A museum, perhaps? Thorn's smile was a rictus. With Reggie? Perished the thought. Rivals make the race worth running, Inspector. Without the spur, what's left but dust? He saw Craddock to the door, the knocker falling with a finality that echoed down the lane. By 4 o'clock, Craddock was back at the station house in Market Basing, a squat brick edifice that smelled of ink and overboiled cabbage. He dictated notes to a sergeant while telephoning the Devon Constabulary regarding Miss Edith Hargrove. Retired headmistress, you say? Prim as a poker from the sound of it. Wire her the particulars, train times, that sort. The reply came brisk. Miss Hargrove had been apprised and would arrive by the morrow's express. No hysterics, the Devon man chuckled. Said she'd pack her blacks and be there to sort the muddle. Tough old bird. Craddock hung up, rubbing his temples. The pieces did not fit, not yet. No forced entry, no theft, save perhaps the heart's quiet surrender. Yet that scent lingered in his memory, elusive as a half-remembered dream. He wired London for a specialist on exotic poisons, curare. No, absurd. Hargrove had never ventured beyond the Channel. Still, one learned to trust the nose in this trade. Meanwhile, in the sun-dappled heart of Little Chipping, The vicarage garden bloomed with the tardy opulence of September. Michaelmas daisies nodding conspiratorially, a late honeybee droning among the lavender. Miss Jane Marple had not stirred from her bench since luncheon, her knitting a steady metronome to the afternoon's revelations. Mrs. Simmons, the vicar's wife, had returned from the village hall bearing a basket of comestibles and calamities. Her round face flushed from the steep of the high street. "Jane, you won't credit it," she puffed, collapsing beside her friend with the drama of a fallen soufflé. "The whole of Little Chipping's in a ferment. Mrs. Phipps at the anchor, weeping into her gin, and old Mrs. Archer claiming the dollhouses are cursed, haunted by the ghosts of aborted children, or some such nonsense. As if Reggie Hargrove needed spirits to fell him. The man's been doddering toward the grave since Amelia passed." Miss Marple's needles paused, her gaze drifting to a caterpillar, inching along a rose stem, deliberate, insatiable. "Curses, dear, how very medieval! Though I suppose in a village one must have one's bogies. And Mr. Hargrove, who's such a collector. I recall the fate. He held court like a sultan over his silks. Those tiny rooms of his, peep shows into propriety, aren't they? Ladies sipping from cups no larger than thimbles, gentlemen plotting behind fans. All the world's a stage, as Mr. Shakespeare says, but writ small. Mrs. Simmons poured tea from a thermos, the steam rising like a genie's promise. Stage indeed. And now the curtain's down on poor Reggie. Heart, Haydock says, popped like a weevil in a biscuit. But Laura Bentley's in bits. I called at the Grange this morning. Took her a veal and ham pie. Girls all aflutter. Says Thorne was there last night. Thick as thieves till he wasn't. Voices through the wall, she claims. Something about the new dollhouse being stolen goods in Thorne's book. Miss Marple accepted the cup, her sip measured as a dowser's dip. Stolen goods? Dear me, auctions can be such battlegrounds, bids flying like arrows, enmities forged in the heat of a gavel's fall. I remember a similar dust-up in St. Mary Mead, over a Spode tea set. Mrs. Price Ridley outbid old General Easterly by a shilling. He never spoke to her again, and she found arsenic in her raspberry jam not a month later. Coincidence, of course, but human nature does love its revenges. Mrs. Simmons leaned in, voice dropping to a conspiratorial burr. Well, Thorne's been green as grass since Reggie trumped him on that Queen Anne last month. 200 guineas, they say, for a model with real silver taps. And Laura, poor lamb, dependent as a vine on that wall. Reggie's will leaves her the lot, or so the solicitors whisper. Manor, miniatures, the lot. But if there's a codicil favouring Thorne's precious museum, oh, the sparks! Dependence, Miss Marple murmured, her needles resuming their dance. It's a silken noose, often as not. Tightens when one least expects. Though Miss Bentley seems devoted, dotes on her uncle like a daughter. Still, young hearts wander. A collector's life is solitary, leaves room for fancies. The vicar's wife nodded sagely, crumbling a biscuit. Fancies indeed. Laura's had callers, young Dr. Fairchild from the surgery, mooning about with posies. But Reggie's will nixes suitors, ties the purse strings tight till she's 30. To keep the chaff from the wheat, he called it. Harsh, but there you are. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, mild as milk. Harsh, yes. And yet wills are like dollhouse attics, full of forgotten trunks, surprises tumbling out when least desired. One must read between the lines, dear, or perhaps beneath the glaze. By 5, the tea things cleared. Miss Marple had excused herself to the vicarage's upstairs parlour, a sanctum of faded chintz and shelves bowed under Trollope and Thackeray. She settled by the window overlooking the churchyard, where yew trees whispered of yesteryears, and drew from her basket a length of knitting, now a scarf, pale as moonlight, its stitches a code only she could decipher. The afternoon's gossip swirled in her mind like leaves in a gust. Thorne's envy, Laura's fragility, the spectre of a will like a locked bureau. Human nature, she reflected, was the great miniaturist, crafting facades of affection from base alloys of greed and grudge. In Danmead, there had been a collector of stamps, philatelist par excellence, poisoned by a rival over a penny black. The method, a lick of the hinge, innocent, deadly. But here, bare hands on porcelain, a toppled figurine. Coincidence or choreography? A tap at the door heralded Mrs. Simmons's niece, young Emily, a freckled girl of 18 with the bloom of the village still upon her. "Aunt Jane," she said breathlessly, "I've just from the High Street. Everyone's saying Inspector Craddock's poking about Thorne's shop. And Mrs. Phipps swears she heard a parcel rattling when Thorne left the Grange. Brown paper, secretive as sin." Miss Marple smiled, patting the settee. "Rattling, you say? Like dice in a miser's pocket, or perhaps tiny furniture shifting in its box? Dear me, parcels can be such telltales. Sit, child, and pour yourself some milk. Now, this Dr. Fairchild you mentioned, does he bring posies to Miss Bentley often?" Emily giggled, perching like a bird. "Oh, always. Roses from his garden, red as a fox's brush. But Laura's that proper, blushes and bolts. Uncle Reggie didn't hold with flirts, you see. Called them moths round the porcelain lamp." "Moths?" echoed Miss Marple softly, her gaze on the churchyard, where a gravedigger's spade bit the earth with rhythmic finality. "Drawn to the light, poor things, till the flame consumes. But porcelain endures, doesn't it? Cool, unyielding. One wonders what secrets it might hold, if only it could speak." As dusk crept over Little Chipping, painting the downs in bruised purples, Craddock returned to the Grange for a second sweep. The drawing-room yielded little, a smudge of white powder on the desk blotter, perhaps from unpacking the new arrival, and a London auction catalogue, dog-eared at the Regency listing. Winner, R. Hargrove, 250 guineas. Runner-up, P. Thorne, 200. He bagged the powder for analysis. Residue, harmless likely, but one never knew. In the hall, he paused at a console table, where a silver salver held the day's post. A bill from the carrier, a postcard from Paris, greetings from a dealer, effusive on next lots, and a sealed envelope, postmarked Devon, addressed in a copperplate hand to Miss E. Hargrove. Craddock slit it open, family correspondence, but curiosity pricked. Inside, a single sheet. "Dearest Reggie, your wire on the Spode figurine arrived. Splendid news. Post the measurements, I'll sketch the companion. Envy your trove, Edie." Innocent, yet it stirred the pot. Another rival, familial this time. Night fell proper then, the village lamps flickering too, life like wary eyes. Craddock motored back to Market Basing, the road winding through hedgerows that clawed at the headlights. At the station, a wire from London awaited, post-mortem preliminary, possible toxin, pending tests, heart not the culprit. Craddock stared at the slip, the pipe dropping from his lips to scatter ash across the blotter. Toxin in Little Chipping. He crushed the wire in his fist, mind racing to bare hands, to porcelain cool as a summer dawn. Across the county, in the vicarage, Miss Marple laid aside her knitting, the scarf half done, patterns of pearl and plain mirroring the twists of the case. She rose, drawing the curtains against the dark, and paused at the mirror, her reflection serene, a grandmother's mask over a mind honed sharp as a bodkin. Envy, she whispered to the glass, is the thief in the night, slips in with a rattling parcel, leaves death in a top hat. But the game is afoot, and old ladies have long memories. In Briar Patch, Percival Thorne bolted his door, the Jacobean manner mocking him from the table, its missing chimney a void like guilt. He poured a stiff brandy, hands trembling as he raised the glass. To rivals, he toasted the empty room and their damnable luck. The liquor burned, but not so fiercely as the memory of Hargrove's laugh, triumphant, bare-handed, oblivious. And in the Grange, Laura Bentley bolted upright in her canopied bed, the house creaking like a ship in storm. Moonlight silvered the floorboards. And in the hall below, a floorboard groaned, footsteps, or the settling of old bones. She clutched the counterpane, whispering, "Uncle?" But only silence answered, thick with unspoken legacies. Little Chipping slept, or pretended to, its secrets coiled tight as a watch spring. Yet springs, Miss Marple knew, were made to unwind. And when they did, the chimes struck clear as a village clock at midnight. Chapter 3. Shadows in the Parlour. 2 days had passed since the shadow of death had fallen across Willowbrook Grange, and Little Chipping, that bastion of bucolic repose, had begun to stir beneath its placid surface, like a pond disturbed by a thrown pebble. The ripples spread outward in ever-widening circles. From the Anchor and Plough, where Mrs. Phipps held court over her third gin of the morning, recounting the shriek that had rent the dawn, to the post office, where the postmistress, Mrs. Gribble, weighed parcels with one hand and scandal with the other, and thence to the churchyard, where the sexton paused in his digging to murmur of curses upon the collector's hoard. "Them dollies," he averred to a cluster of idlers, "they got eyes, they do. Watchin' and waitin' for their due." Superstition, of course, but in a village where the oldest oak was said to harbour the ghost of a smuggler, such tales found fertile soil. Inspector Dermot Craddock, ensconced in the cramped back parlour of the station house at Market Basing, felt the weight of those ripples pressing upon him like an ill-fitting collar. The room, with its horsehair sofa shedding tufts like autumn moulting and a coal fire that smoked more than it warmed, was hardly conducive to clear thought. Yet thought was what he required. Sharp, unyielding, the sort that sliced through the fog of alibis and affectations. His pipe, that faithful companion, lay cold upon the desk, for the morning's post had brought a missive that demanded sobriety. The preliminary report from the forensic pathologist in London, penned in the precise script of a man who dissected not merely bodies, but illusions. Craddock unfolded the fool's cap with the reverence due a pronouncement from Delphi, his grey eyes narrowing as he scanned the lines. "Not the heart, Inspector," the pathologist had written, with that dry detachment which masked the macabre. "Arterial occlusion absent, ventricles sound. Rather, a neuromuscular blockade. Curare beyond doubt. South American origin, typically arrow poison for the blowpipe hunts of the Amazon. Absorbed transdermally, odorless, paralyzes the respiratory muscles in minutes. Lethal dose, mere milligrams. Your victim handled something coated. One presumes bare skin the portal." There followed a list of symptoms. The serene surprise on Hargrove's face, the outstretched hand, the instantaneous collapse, all fitting like pieces in a grotesque mosaic. Curare, Craddock echoed aloud, the word tasting of jungle rot and forbidden rites. He leaned back, the chair creaking in protest, and stared at the ceiling where damp had mapped a Rorschach of suspicions. Little chipping and blowpipes? It was as incongruous as a polar bear at a tea dance. Hargrove, that fastidious collector, felled by a dart from the wilds? Yet the evidence leered. The figurine, that innocuous top-hatted gentleman, dispatched to the yard's chemists for assay. Preliminary swabs hinted at residue on its unglazed base. A tacky film, invisible to the naked eye, deadly to the touch. Craddock's mind replayed Laura Bentley's testimony. Bare hands, as always. And Thorne's evasion, gloves for me, preserves the patina. Motive? The auction grudge, perhaps, or deeper currents in the will's murky depths. He reached for the telephone, cranking the handle with vigour that betrayed his unease. "Sergeant, get on to the yard, expedite that figurine analysis, and trace curare sources, importers, botanical outfits, even veterinary suppliers. God knows who keeps the stuff in a drawer with their laudanum." The line crackled with the sergeant's assent, and Craddock hung up, drumming fingers on the blotter. The village would erupt when this leaked, and leak it would, for little Chipping guarded secrets no better than a colander held water. He resolved to return to the Grange forthwith, to re-interview under the glare of this new light. Poison changed the game from elegy to indictment. The locked room was no longer a poet's conceit, but a murderer's boast. Across the county, in the sun-warmed confines of the vicarage at Little Chipping, Miss Jane Marple pursued her inquiries with the gentle persistence of a river wearing down granite. The morning had dawned crisp, with a rime of frost silvering the pumpkin leaves in the kitchen garden, and Miss Marple, fortified by a breakfast of kedgeree and weak India tea, had penned a note to Miss Laura Bentley. "My dear," it ran in her neat slanting hand, "in times of sorrow, the heart craves the solace of familiar faces. Might I call this forenoon, to offer what comfort I may, and perhaps a recipe for lavender sachets to freshen those dear little rooms?" The reply came by return, borne by a village lad on a bicycle, grateful beyond words. L.B. Miss Marple set forth at 11, her brogues crunching the gravel of the lane like whispered confidences. The Grange loomed ahead, its facade serene under a sky of scudding clouds, but the windows seemed to watch her approach with a vigilance born of recent violation. The door was opened by Mrs. Phipps, her eyes red-rimmed but her manner brisk as boot polish. "Miss Marple, ma'am, come you in. Poor lamb's in the parlour. Won't stir from it, says the sight steadies her." The hall smelled of beeswax and grief, a bouquet laced with the faint acrid echo that Miss Marple noted with a lift of her brow. Almonds? No, something earthier, like wet clay from a river-bank. Laura Bentley awaited in the drawing-room, perched on the chintz sofa like a bird with a broken wing. The space, vast and vaulted, felt shrunken now, the dollhouses in their cases transformed from whimsies to witnesses. Sunlight slanted through the sashes, gilding the glass fronts where tiny lives played out in eternal tableau. A governess reading to charges in a nursery aglow with firelight, a fox hunt frozen mid-gallop on a heath no larger than a handkerchief. The Regency townhouse dominated the central table, its unpacking half complete, furniture strewn like the aftermath of a child's tantrum, the grand piano askew, its bench empty save for a faint smudge of dust where the top-hatted gentleman had perched. "Miss Marple," Laura breathed, rising with a rustle of skirts. Her face, pale as skim milk, bore the marks of a sleepless night, shadows beneath the eyes like bruises from an unseen hand. "How kind! Uncle Reggie spoke so highly of you, from the fete, you know. Said you had the eye for the exquisite, like him." She gestured vaguely at the models, her hand trembling. "Sit, please. Mrs. Phipps has lemon barley, cooling on a day like this." Miss Marple settled into an armchair, her basket of wools deposited at her feet like a faithful hound. "My dear, no thanks necessary. Sorrow is a thief that steals in the night, but company mends the lock. Your uncle, such a gentle soul. I envied him his treasures in a way. Peering into those little worlds, it's like holding a mirror to our own, isn't it? All the bustle and bother, reduced to pretty proportions." Laura poured the cordial with unsteady grace, the liquid glinting like liquid topaz. He lived for them, truly. This new one, the Regency, arrived Tuesday, special from London. He was like a boy with a new drum, unpacking till the lamps guttered. "Laura," he said, "this is history in miniature, the Prince Regent's own circle, or near enough. And the figures, oh, such artistry! The gentleman at the piano with his hat at that saucy angle, he was to lead the quadrille, Uncle decreed." Her voice caught, eyes straying to the table. "That one fell beside him. I can't bear to touch it now." Miss Marple followed her gaze, rising with the deliberation of one who savours each step. She approached the dollhouse, her shadow merging with the sun's to dance across the facade. The structure was a marvel. Pilasters in ivory, balconies delicate as lace, a fanlight over the door etched with acanthus leaves. Within, the salon unfolded in microcosm, walls papered in stripes of rose and cream, a mantel clock frozen at 3:15, chairs upholstered in satin that shimmered under the light. The piano, a tour de force of ebony and pearl, stood open, its keys a temptation to phantom fingers. "Exquisite," she murmured, bending close, her breath fogging the air but not the glass. "And this little chap, the one in question? He fits here, I see, on the stool. Bare hands, you mentioned? Your uncle's habit?" Laura nodded, twisting her handkerchief into knots. "Always. Gloves dull the soul," he'd say. Felt the craftsmanship, the life in the glaze. I teased him once. "What if a splinter, uncle?" But he laughed it off. Last I saw him, he was adjusting that very curtain. The lace one's crooked there still. She pointed to a diminutive drapery, askew as if a breeze from the downs had intruded. Then I went to the garden. When I came in at dusk, the room was dark. Thought he'd retired. Miss Marple straightened, her fingers itching to trace the porcelain as Hargrove had. Yet she refrained, content with observation. The room whispered clues. A half-eaten apple on the side table, browning at the edges. A fountain pen uncapped beside an open ledger. Ink still wet on the page. Notes on the auction provenance, marginalia in Hargrove's spidery hand. Thorn bid 200, foolish persistence. Human nature, she reflected, was the ultimate miniaturist, crafting rivalries from whispers, poisons from passions. The garden, she prompted gently, resuming her seat, visible from the lane. A solace, weeding, turns the mind from worries. Mostly, Laura admitted, zipping her cordial. The wall's high, but the gate's ajar sometimes. I planted snowdrops. Early bloomers, Uncle loved them. Heard voices, though, Mr. Thorne's, sharp as a tack. Overbid yourself, Reggie. Regret it you'll. but laughter after, they clasped hands at the door, then quiet, till morning. A shiver took her, despite the fire's crackle. "The village buzzes, Miss Marple." "Mrs. Gribble says poison. Can you credit it? Uncle, poisoned, like a Borgia. Do tale." Miss Marple's needles emerged from her basket, clicking softly, a counterpoint to the girl's agitation. "Buzz, yes. Villages are hives, my dear. Honey and stings in equal measure. Poison, well, the doctor's report will tell. But hearts fail in queer ways, don't they? Or so they say." She did not press. Laura's eyes held a fragility that might shatter under probing. Instead, she steered to safer waters. "And your aunt, Miss Edith, coming from Devon? By the 3:15 train. Terribly efficient. Wired she'd rectify matters. Uncle's sister, salt of the earth, but vinegar-tongued. Taught classics at the school there. Quotes Horace at breakfast. Loved the collection in her way. Sketched figures for her own models. But distant, hasn't visited since Easter." The conversation meandered then from Hargrove's idiosyncrasies, his aversion to cats, his fondness for damson gin, to Laura's own quiet dreams. A cottage garden, perhaps, or a post as companion to a lady in Bath. Uncle was kindness itself, she sighed, but the Grange is vast. Echoes, you know, like living in one of his dollhouses, only life-sized and lonely. Miss Marple nodded, her mind cataloguing dependence laced with resentment, or genuine bloom of grief. The girl seemed artless, yet artlessness could cloak calculation, as a veil hides a dagger. A knock at the street door interrupted, heavy and imperative, like the rap of authority. Mrs. Phipps's voice floated in, "Mr. Crowe, sir, solicitor, for Miss Bentley." Laura paled, but rose. "Elias Crowe, Uncle's man of business, come to settle affairs." She led the way to the hall, Miss Marple trailing with the unobtrusive grace of a shadow. Mr. Elias Crowe filled the vestibule like a galleon in full sail, portly, ruddy-cheeked, with a walrus moustache that quivered as he doffed his Homburg. In his 50s, he exuded the bluff assurance of a man who had shepherded wills through tempests of tears and tantrums. "Miss Bentley, my dear, profound sympathies. Hargrove was a client of 20 years, a prince among men." His gaze flicked to Miss Marple, registering her with a solicitor's appraisal. "And this, Miss Marple, a friend Laura supplied, from the vicarage." Crowe bowed, a ponderous inclination. "Charmed. Shall we to the study? The documents await." He lumbered ahead, his briefcase swinging like a pendulum, and the trio followed to a sanctum at the rear, oak-panelled, smelling of vellum and vanilla from a vase of dried pods. Hargrove's desk dominated, littered with folios and a half-played game of patience, the cards frozen in mid-solitaire. Crowe settled behind the desk with a grunt, snapping open the case to extract a sheaf of papers bound in green ribbon. "The will, Miss Bentley, executed last March, witnessed by myself and old Jenkins, the corn chandler. Sound as a bell, no clouds on the title." He cleared his throat, spectacles perched on his nose like a schoolmaster's rebuke. "To you, the niece, the Grange, its contents including the collection, valued, I'd estimate, at £15,000, though the miniatures alone could fetch double at Sotheby's. Bequests, 500 to the Village Hall Roof Fund, 200 to Mrs. Phipps for faithful service, the residue to St. Mary's Restoration. No codicils since spring." Laura's hand flew to her throat, a gasp escaping. "All to me!" But Uncle spoke of a museum, the collection for public view. He dined with the county trustees last month. Said it was his legacy. Crow tugged his moustache, a habit betraying unease. Aye, he mulled it, over port at the club no less. But the draft went unsigned. Too soon, he called it. Let the little one stay in the family a spell longer. Family being you, my dear. His eyes twinkled, but a shadow crossed them. Something unspoken, like a clause in fine print. Miss Marple, seated by the window where Ivy tapped the pane like an importunate visitor, observed the byplay with quiet acuity. The will, a cornucopia for Laura, a slight for aspirants to the trove. Thorn, perhaps, who dreamed of a gallery in his shop. Or Miss Edith, with her sketches and scholarly airs. A generous bequest, she remarked mildly. Your uncle must have cherished you greatly, Miss Bentley. Though legacies stir the pot, don't they? Like adding spice to a dull stew, brings out flavours one never suspected. Crow chuckled, a rumble like distant thunder. Spice indeed. Reggie had no enemies I knew of, save the occasional auction joust. Thorn, for instance, called at my office last fortnight, hot under the collar about that Queen Anne. Crow, says he, Hargrove's outfoxed me again. Mark my words, it'll cost him. But bluster, you know. Collectors can't. Cost him? Laura echoed, her voice a thread. You mean? Figuratively, child. A bid here, a grudge there. But Reggie laughed it off. Said Thorn's bark outpaced his bite. Crow's gaze drifted to the window, where the downs rolled like a green sea. Still, overhearings happen. My clerk caught Thorn lingering post-meeting, eavesdropping on Reggie's chat about the trust fund. The one for young artists in miniatures. Reggie was seed money man. Cut private rivals out, you see, Thorn chief among them. Miss Marple's needles clicked, a soft metronome marking the revelation. Envy, the green-eyed serpent, coiled anew. She recalled a case in Gossington, where a tapestry had concealed not merely a body, but a lifetime of slights repaid in strychnine. Overhearings, she mused, like mice in the wainscot, nibbling at secrets. And the new dollhouse? From the London sale. Any whispers there? Crow nodded, rifling the papers. Bond Street last Tuesday. Hargrove's bid clinched it over Thorn's. Clark confirmed. Parcel dispatched Thursday. Arrived Friday eve. Reggie signed for it himself. Carrier remembers the fuss. Handle with kid gloves, he joked, ironic now. Laura shivered, rising abruptly. I can't. Excuse me. She fled, to the hall, footsteps echoing like retreating sobs. Crow sighed, closing the folio. Poor girl. Dependent as a dock leaf on the rain. Hargrove doted, took her in after the crash, God rest her parents, but the will ties strings. No marriage till 30, without trustee's nod. To sift the wheat from chaff, he put it, harsh but paternal. Miss Marple rose, basket in hand. Paternal, yes, and yet strings can tangle. Trip the unwary. Thank you, Mr. Crow. You've illuminated much. She paused at the door. One last fancy. That figurine, the top-hatted one. Part of the set, you think? Or a singleton slipped in like a cuckoo in the nest? Crow's brow furrowed. Set, assuredly. Auction catalogue lists 12 figures. But Reggie mentioned a rival bid on that very piece. Thorn, again. Jealous as Othello, he quipped. He escorted her out, the knocker falling with a hollow boom. In the lane, Miss Marple paused, the air sharp with the scent of wood smoke from distant chimneys. The will, a map of motives, with Thorn's grudge a bold X. Yet Laura's flight, Crow's unease, ripples from deeper waters. She turned toward the vicarage, mind a-whirl with patterns. Bare hands on poisoned porcelain, a rattling parcel in brown paper, whispers of trusts and overbids. Human nature, she thought, cast the longest shadows, stretching from auction rooms to drawing-room floors, where a top hat concealed not merriment but malice. Meanwhile, Craddock's motor car growled up the Grange drive, scattering gravel like accusations. He found Mrs. Phipps in the kitchen, kneading dough with punitive force. "Inspector, back so soon? The young miss is resting. Solicitor's just left." "The report's in," Craddock said curtly, doffing his hat. "Poison, curare. On the figurine, likely. Where's Thorne's place? I'll pay a call." Phipps's hands stilled, flour dusting her apron like fallen snow. "Curare? Like in them jungle books? Lord love us!" Her eyes widened. "Thorne's shop. High Street, the Gilded Trinket. But he shut early today, mumbling of headaches." Craddock nodded, striding out. The village high street was a ribbon of activity. Shoppers haggling over cabbages, a gaggle of matrons at the haberdashers dissecting the tragedy. He pushed into Thorne's emporium, the bell tinkling like a false alarm. The shop was a cavern of curios, shelves groaning under brass samovars, lacquered boxes from the east, and, tucked in a corner, a case of miniatures, their glass fogged with disuse. Thorne emerged from the back, wiping hands on a rag, his face a mask of affronted dignity. "Inspector, twice in 2 days? This about Reggie still? About murder, Mr. Thorne?" Craddock's voice was level, but his eyes bored like augers. "Curare on that figurine you admired. Handled it, did you? Or watched Hargrove do the honours?" Thorne recoiled, the rag dropping from palsied fingers. "Murder! Good God! Curare! Preposterous! I told you! Gloves for me!" Reggie touched it. Yes, fussed over the base. The unglazed bit. But poison? I'd no notion. "None?" Craddock advanced, notebook at the ready. "Your pigments order. From London, last month. White powder, exotic. Care to explain?" "For dollhouse paints. Ivory tint. Nothing more." Thorne sputtered, colour draining from his cheeks. "Botanical supplier. Arrowroot base. Harmless. Check the invoice." "We will." Craddock noted the quiver in the man's voice, the dart of eyes to a locked drawer. "And the parcel you carried from the Grange Friday?" "Brown paper, rattling contents, Miss Bentley's words, not mine. A trifle, snuff box for a client, sealed tight." Thorne drew himself up, but the bluster rang hollow. "Alibi holds. Postman at 8. Alone thereafter. This is persecution." Craddock snapped the book shut. "Routine, sir, but routines uncover rot." He departed, the bell mocking Thorne's solitude. Back at the station, wires flew. To importers, confirming Thorne's order. Arrowroot, yes, but laced with curare traces. To the postman, verifying the wave at 8. And to Devon, hastening Miss Edith's arrival. Craddock lit his pipe at last, the smoke curling like suspicions. The parlour shadows lengthened, the game deepened. In the vicarage, Miss Marple shared tea with Mrs. Simmons, the pot steaming with revelations. The will, dear, generous to a fault. But faults breed fancies, don't they? A rival overhears, a parcel rattles, echoes of Othello, as Mr. Crow said. Mrs. Simons clucked. "Othello? Jealousy, you mean? Thorne's fit to burst. Shop talk says he's mortgaged to the hilt for bids. And Laura, Dr. Fairchild mooning again today, with lilies, but the will's strings." "Strings," Miss Marple agreed, needles flying. "Pull one, and the puppet dances, or strangles. But puppets have wills of their own, hidden in the folds." As twilight bruised the sky, Edith Hargrove's train pulled in, disgorging a figure in tweeds and brogues, tall, angular, with hair scraped to an iron-grey bun and eyes like flints struck for spark. She strode to the grange, valise in hand, the village falling silent in her wake. "Edith Hargrove," she announced to Phipps, "to claim my brother's effects. And heaven help the fool who tampered with them." The parlour shadows welcomed her, thick with secrets yet untold. Little Chipping held its breath. The unmasking hovered, a curtain half drawn. In the night, Thorn paced his cottage, the Jacobean dollhouse glaring from the table, chimneys askew, a tiny door ajar. He unlocked the drawer, withdrawing a vial, empty now, its label peeled, curare extract specimen only. His laugh was a gasp. "Specimen," he whispered, "and now a grave." Laura, in her chamber, clutched a locket, her mother's, with a miniature portrait inside. Tears fell, but in the glass her reflection smiled, faint as a promise. Miss Marple, knitting by candlelight, unravelled a row, error or omen. "Shadows," she murmured, "play tricks." But light finds the cracks, always. The downs sighed, wind through the beeches like a dirge. The parlour waited, its dollhouses silent sentinels, guardians of a doom scripted in porcelain and spite. Chapter 4. Threads of Deception. The morning of the third day broke over Little Chipping with the deceptive clarity of a counterfeit coin, bright, unblemished, yet ringing false to those attuned to its timbre. Frost lingered in the hollows of the downs, like the remnants of a whispered lie, and the village stirred to life with the creak of milk churns and the distant lowing of cattle, as if the world beyond Willowbrook Grange had conspired to feign normalcy. But normalcy was a fragile veneer in such places, apt to crack under the heel of misfortune, and the crack that had appeared with Reginald Hargrove's demise now spider-webbed through the community, ensnaring the innocent and the culpable alike in its silken web. Inspector Dermot Craddock arrived at the county morgue in Market Basing shortly after 8, his motor car coughing to a halt in the yard, where laurel bushes clawed at the sky like arthritic fingers. The building, a squat edifice of yellow brick that smelled perpetually of carbolic and regret, housed the dead with the impersonal efficiency of a filing cabinet. Craddock, his overcoat dusted with the night's chill, presented his credentials to the attendant, a sallow youth whose eyes held the glazed vacancy of one who had long since numbed to the parade of cadavers. "Hargrove," Craddock said curtly, "the full report." Upstairs, in a chamber lit by a single bulb that swung like a hanged man's noose, Dr. Haydock awaited, his silver mane dishevelled as if ruffled by the ghosts of diagnoses past. The pathologist from London, a wiry man named Fortescue, with spectacles like bottle ends and a voice as dry as desiccated bone, stood beside the steel table where Hargrove lay shrouded in a sheet that did little to conceal the indignity of his pose. The air was thick with the tang of formalin, undercut by that elusive, vegetal whiff that had haunted Craddock since the drawing-room, now identified unequivocally as the ghost of Curare. "Confirmed," Fortescue intoned, peeling back the sheet with the dispassion of a dealer unveiling a flawed gem. Hargrove's face, waxy and serene, bore no marks of violence save the subtle cyanosis at the lips, a blue tinge like ink bleeding on vellum. Transdermal absorption, textbook, the figurine's base, unglazed porcelain, porous as a sponge, coated with a solution, dried to a film thinner than cigarette paper. Victim handles it, say 5 minutes of manipulation, and the toxin seeps in. Paralysis follows, diaphragm locks, heart stutters to halt. No convulsions, no cry, hence the surprise. Dead before he hit the rug. Craddock's pipe clenched tighter between his teeth, unlit against the regulations. Source: how's a village collector laying hands on jungle juice? Fortescue shrugged, a gesture like the shrug of a skeleton's shoulders. Not your garden variety rat poison. Curares, restricted. Medical channels, research labs, exotic imports for dart collectors or ethnobotanists. But traces in Hargrove's system match samples from a London supplier. Diluted extract, odour masked with arrowroot starch. Your man touched death, all right, bare as the day he was born. Haydock cleared his throat, his moustache twitching. Queer business, Dermot. Reggie's heart was sound as a bell. Rode his bicycle to the fete last summer. Huffing but hearty. It's devilish. Like one of those penny dreadfuls, blowpipes in the parlour. Craddock nodded absently, his mind threading the needle of evidence. Thorne's pigment order, the rattling parcel, the overheard grudge. Devilish, yes, and the village'll lap it up. Poison in porcelain. Keep this under your hat till the inquest. I'll handle the press. He turned to leave, pausing at the door. One more. Time of death. Narrow it. Between 7 and 9 p.m. Friday, Fortescue replied, consulting his notes. Digestion half complete. Cold collation. Rigour setting in by morning discovery. Craddock emerged into the sunlight, squinting as if the glare mocked his shadows. The inquest loomed at noon in the village hall, a formality, open verdict pending, but with poison in the air. It would draw the moths, gawkers, gossips, and perhaps the moth who had fluttered the flame. He motored back to Little Chipping, the road unspooling like a detective's reel of film, each hedgerow a potential witness withholding its tale. At the vicarage, Miss Jane Marple had risen with the lark, her routine as unvarying as the tides. Breakfast, a poached egg on toast, Darjeeling with a dash of milk, had been taken in the bay window overlooking the garden, where dew jewelled the spiderwebs like diamonds strung on deceit. Her knitting lay companion to the morning paper, the headlines a murmur of distant wars and royal whims, but her thoughts wove tighter patterns. The Will's revelations, Crow's uneasy twitch, Laura's fluttering gaze toward the empty piano stool. Threads, she mused, with a detective's loom, fine, invisible, yet strong enough to bind the guilty. Mrs. Simmons bustled in from the kitchen, her apron dusted with flour from scones destined for the Women's Institute. Jane, the hall's a bedlam already, bunting from the fete still up, and Mrs. Archer reserving the front pew for her cursed Dolly's rant. Inquest at noon, everyone's agog. And that Inspector Craddock, phoning for tea, says it's preliminary. Preliminary, my foot. The man's got murder in his eye. Miss Marple folded the paper with precision, her smile mild as meadow grass. Murder, dear? The word trips lightly off the tongue, but weighs heavy in the scales. Dr. Haydock's report, you think? Hearts are treacherous, but poisons. Ah, they leave a taste, don't they? Bitter, lingering. She rose, smoothing her cardigan. I'll attend, of course. The hall's acoustics are dreadful. Echoes play tricks, turn whispers to roars. One must listen closely. By 10:30, the village hall, a timbered barn of a place with rafters festooned in cobwebs, and a stage where the Amdram Society had lately butchered the importance of being earnest, swelled with its audience. Benches creaked under the weight of the curious. Farmers in corduroy. Maids with caps askew, the postmistress tallying mental scores. At the front, a trestle table bore a jug of water and a gavel, behind which sat Coroner Jenkins, a desiccated relic of the law, with a face like crumpled parchment, and a voice that wheezed like a punctured bellows. Craddock slipped in by the side door, notebook at the ready, his presence rippling through the room like a stone in a duck pond. Thorne occupied a rear bench, his tweed jacket rumpled, fingers interlaced as if in prayer or restraint. Laura Bentley, flanked by Mrs. Phipps, sat primly in the second row, her handkerchief a perpetual flutter. Miss Edith Hargrove had arrived the evening prior, installing herself at the Grange like a general claiming headquarters. She now perched at the aisle, notebook in lap, her tweed suit as starched as her demeanour. Miss Marple, arriving last with Mrs. Simmons, chose a central spot, her basket a shield, her eyes scanning the assembly like a cartographer charting fault lines. Jenkins rapped the gavel, a feeble tap that barely quelled the murmurs. Inquest into the death of Reginald Hargrove, gentlemen, of Willowbrook Grange. Cause to be determined. First witness, Mrs. Ethel Phipps, domestic. Mrs. Phipps mounted the stand with the drama of a tragedian, her testimony a torrent. The trays crash, the bodies sprawl, the figurines tumble. Face peaceful like, sir, eyes wide but no pain, and that little mannequin flat on his hat beside Mr. Hargrove's hand. Creepy it was, like he'd reached for help, and the doll turned away. Jenkins nodded, scribbling. No signs of violence. Door locked. Locked from inside, sir. Key in the Yale. No one in or out after I left at 6. Next, Laura Bentley, her voice a quaver of strings. She recounted the evening. Garden weeding, Thorne's visit, Hargrove's humming solitude. Uncle was joyful. The new house enthralled him. He handled the figures bare, always, to feel the soul, he said. I locked up at 8:30. Heard him retire at 10. Visible in the garden, Jenkins probed. The gate ajar. Lane view, yes. Planting snowdrops, hands muddy till dark. Thorne followed, his rustle amplified by nerves. Called for a catalogue. Auction matters. Reggie triumphant over the Regency win. We sparred, as collectors do. Left by 7:20. Home alone thereafter. The figurine, admired it. Reggie posed it at the piano. Charming rogue, that one. And the parcel you carried. Jenkins's eyes gleamed, fed by Craddock's earlier nudge. A snuff-box, gift for a patron. Brown paper, sealed, no rattle worth noting. The postman, a gangling youth named Timms, corroborated. Waved to Mr. Thorne at 8. Window light on. Him at supper. Crow lumbered up then, the will unfurled like a banner of inheritance. To Miss Bentley, estate entire, including collection valued at £15,000 minimum. No recent alterations, bequests charitable. Murmurs swelled, envy, relief, as Edith Hargrove took the stand, her voice a clarion of academia. My brother, scholar of the small, passionate but prudent. Last saw him Easter, discussing figurine sketches I sent from Devon. No enemies. Rivals? Yes, Thorne chief. But murder? Absurd. Heart, surely. Jenkins coughed. Doctor! Haydock rose, spectacles flashing. Initial, cardiac, but London confirms toxin. Curare, absorbed through skin. Lethal, instantaneous. Time, 7 to 9 p.m. Friday. The hall erupted. Gasps, a cry from Mrs. Phipps. Jungle poison! In chipping? Jenkins's gavel pounding like a heartbeat. Thorne blanched, slumping. Laura swayed, caught by Edith's iron arm. Craddock noted it all. The flicker in Thorn's eye, Edith's tightened jaw, the collective inhale as poison transmuted accident to atrocity. "Open verdict," Jenkins declared at last, voice quavering. Further inquiries pending. Adjourned. The exodus was a scrum. Whispers of Thorn's grudge. The will's curse. Bare hands damned. Craddock cornered Thorn in the vestibule. Pipe alight now, smoke veiling his intent. "Your pigments, Mr. Thorn. Arrowroot base, eh? Matches the mask on the curare. Care to walk me through the order?" Thorn's face was ash. "Coincidence, supplier's standard for glazing miniatures. Invoice proves it. Veterinary cast-off, harmless bulk." "We'll see." Craddock's gaze bored. "And that snuff box. Open it for me, now." Thorn fumbled in his pocket, producing a chased silver oval, lid popping to reveal empty velvet. Delivered Saturday, client collected, empty since. Craddock sniffed. Beeswax, nothing more. Yet the parcel's rattle nagged. Snuff box too light, too silent. Alibi thin, sir. Postman waves, that's thin as broth. Thin? Thorn bristled. It's ironclad. Solitary, yes, but who isn't in this backwater? Craddock let him go, turning to Edith Hargrove, who shepherded Laura toward the door. "Miss Hargrove, a word? Your brother's sketches, you mentioned them." Edith's eyes, flinty as quartz, assessed him. "Classics illustrations, miniaturized for his models. Sent a batch last month. He replied ecstatic. No poison talk. Reggie abhorred the dramatic." "And your train? Delayed from Devon, mechanical or points failure, telegraphed ahead. Arrived 9 last night. Grange dark. Slept at the anchor. Intolerable fleas." Craddock noted alibi, train records, demeanour, defensive. He watched them depart, Laura leaning on her aunt like a reed in gale. Miss Marple lingered, buttonholing Mrs. Phipps amid the stragglers. "The inquest, dear, such vapours. But you saw Mr. Thorn leave Friday? The parcel, brown paper, you said?" Phipps nodded, voice a hiss. "Aye, ma'am, 6:30, sharp words. Trailing. Pay dearly," he snapped, but Reggie laughed. Then the parcel, tucked under arm, wrapped tight. Rattled like dice in a cup or pebbles in a pouch. "Book," he called it, but books don't clink so sly. "Clink?" Miss Marple's brow arched, mild as a crescent moon. "Or rattle, like porcelain shifting in straw. Tiny limbs knocking, perhaps." "Could be," Phipps conceded, glancing about. "And after, Mr. Hargrove humming Greensleeves, happy as harvest. Tea at 6, then naught till my scream." Miss Marple patted her arm. "Humming, a balm for the soul. But souls have ears, don't they? Overhear a grudge, and it festers like damp in the wainscot." She drifted out, basket swinging, mind a spindle whirring threads. The rattle a duplicate figurine, switched in a sherry distraction, coated base to doom the bare-handed. Afternoon waned toward the Grange, where Craddock reconvened in the study, Hargrove's sanctum, now a war room of ledgers and lamplight. Wires from London confirmed. Thorn's supplier dealt curare derivatives, specimen vials for study, diverted via a false veterinary claim. The snuff box, traced to a Brighton tobacconist, innocuous. But the figurine's twin, missing from the set per auction manifest. Edith Hargrove presided over tea, her sketches spread like battle plans. Precise inks of Regency dandies, one a top-hatted pianist, moustache exact. My work, Reggie commissioned for authenticity. This one, the rogue at the keys. Sent 2 copies, he chose the finer. Craddock examined it, the paper crisp. 2? Where's the spare? With Reggie, packing slip shows, both arrived. Perhaps in the dollhouse crate. Laura, pale but composed, fetch the remnants from the drawing-room. Straw and shavings in a corner, the crate splintered from Hargrove's haste. No second figurine, nor in the cases, the attic rifled by Griggs's lads. Vanished, Craddock muttered, like the poison. Edith's lips thinned. Theft? Amid murder? Preposterous? Or slight? Craddock countered. A switch. Rival slips in a ringer, coated to kill. Laura gasped. Mr. Thorne! But the handshake. Handshakes lie, Edith snapped. Men and their toys, vile as boys with marbles. Miss Marple, invited by Laura's note, arrived as dusk purpled the windows, her presence a soft intrusion. Tea? How thoughtful. The inquest, such a crush. But crushes reveal, don't they? Faces in the throng, colours shifting. Edith eyed her coolly. Miss Marple, the knitting lady. Village oracle, they say. What threads do you spin from this tangle? Miss Marple accepted a cup, steam veiling her smile. Threads, Miss Hargrove. Oh, the usual. Envy woven with opportunity, grudge dyed in deception. Your sketches, masterful. That gentleman, a flirt I see, eyes elsewhere, like life, isn't it? Posed one way, glancing another. Laura leaned in. Uncle loved them, said they breathed, handled the figures endlessly, bare as birth. Bare, Miss Marple echoed, sipping. Vulnerable, then. A poisoner's gift. Tempts the touch, seals the fate. Craddock, pipe aglow, interjected. Precisely. Thorne's order. Curare-laced starch. Parcel rattle. Switched figurine. Motive. The trust fund. Overheard, you say, Mr. Crow? Edith snorted. Blather! Percival's a curmudgeon, not a killer. Look to the will, Laura's windfall. Dependent girls turn desperate. I've seen it at school. Laura flushed crimson. Aunt, uncle was my world. Worlds shift, Edith retorted. Suitors circle, that Fairchild pup, with his posies and puppy eyes. Reggie nixed him. Will's strings bind till 30. Chafe enough for scheming? Craddock noted the barb, the girl's recoil. Red herring, or raw nerve? Dr. Fairchild, interview pending, but the toxin, exotic. Who else in chipping dabbles in exotics? Miss Marple's needles clicked. A soft requiem. Exotics? The vicar's greenhouse, orchids from Borneo, poisons in their sap. But Reggie? No, his wilds were auctions, not Amazon. Still, diversions, a botanical tome in his library, perhaps. Borrowed from Thorne's shop. Thorne, summoned by wire, arrived at 6, hat in hand, face a thundercloud. Harassment! My order, legitimate, specimen for glazing tests. File empty, discarded weeks ago. Discarded where? Craddock pressed. Dustbin, gone with the ashes. Griggs fetched the bin from Briar-patch. Sodden tea leaves, eggshells, and a shard of glass, etched with a label fragment, X'd. Thorne deflated. Research! Honest! Honest men don't switch figurines, Craddock said silkily. Your attic, search tomorrow. Thorne stormed out, the door slamming like a verdict. Evening deepened, the company dispersing, Edith to rifle Hargrove's correspondence, Laura to her room with a headache file. Craddock lingered with Miss Marple in the hall, gaslight flickering. Your take, madam? Threads pulling tight? She adjusted her cape, eyes twinkling. Tight, Inspector, but knotted. The rattle, not snuff, but substitute. Duplicate gentleman, base kissed by death. Thorne visits, distracts with sherry, switches in a blink. Knows Reggie's bare touch, the habit fatal. Envy the dye, the trust the twist. Craddock exhaled smoke. Poetic, evidence, patience, she counselled. Threads tangle before they tauten. And Miss Edith, sketches twin, one vanished, where the other? He nodded, seeing it. A sister's access, Devon's distance alibi thin. Or Laura's garden gate, a jar for accomplices. Night cloaked the grange, stars pricking like needles. In the vicarage, Miss Marple unravelled a row. Error mended, pattern restored. Deception, she whispered to the dark, is the finest thread, spins lies from truths till the loom betrays. Across the lane, Thorn bolted his door, vile shard haunting his dreams. Fairchild, in his surgery, penned a note to Laura. Lilies tomorrow? Edith pored over letters, one catching her eye. A Devon postmark, unsigned. The rogue returns, bid high. Laura, abed, clutched the locket, its miniature, mocking. A face like Thorn's, younger, unmoustached. Little Chipping slumbered, but deception wove on, threads crossing, ensnaring, waiting for the tug that would unravel all. In the down's embrace, wind whispered through beeches. Secrets, like leaves, must fall. Chapter 5. The auction's echo. The fourth day dawned over Little Chipping with a sky like tarnished silver. Clouds heavy with the promise of rain that hung, undecided, above the downs. The village, its rhythm disrupted by the grim theatre of Reginald Hargrove's death, pulsed now with a feverish curiosity. Its lanes alive with whispers that darted like minnows through the tea-shops and churchyard. The inquest's revelation of curare had ignited imaginations. Mrs. Gribble at the post office spoke of savage darts in hushed tones, while the sexton, pausing over his spade, muttered of collectors' curses carried on the wind. Yet beneath this clamour, a deeper current flowed, the machinery of justice, grinding slow but relentless. As Inspector Dermot Craddock tightened his net around the threads of deception that wove through Willowbrook Grange. Craddock stood in the drawing-room of the Grange at 9 sharp, his overcoat slung over a chair. The air sharp with the scent of wax and the faint, lingering ghost of that tropical taint. Curare, now a confirmed spectre. The dollhouses stood sentinel in their glass cases, their miniature inhabitants frozen in attitudes of eternal decorum. A butler polishing silver, a lady penning a letter that would never be posted. The Regency townhouse, centrepiece of Hargrove's final obsession, dominated the unpacking table, its lace curtains still askew, the piano bench empty where the top-hatted gentleman had once presided. Craddock's gaze lingered on the spot, his pipe unlit, his mind turning over the forensic report like a jeweller assessing a flawed stone. The figurine's base, porous as pumice, had indeed borne a lethal film. Curare, masked in arrowroot starch, applied with the precision of malice. But whose hand had painted the stroke? He had summoned Constable Griggs and a pair of junior officers to scour the attic, a warren of cobwebs and forgotten trunks where Hargrove's overflow of treasures lay like relics of a lost empire. "Every crate, every box," Craddock instructed, his voice clipped as a telegraph. "The auction manifest lists 12 figures for the Regency set, 11 accounted for. Find the 12th, or anything that rattles like porcelain in straw." Griggs nodded, his helmet bobbing, and led his men upstairs, their boots thudding like muffled drums. Downstairs, Craddock paced the parquet, notebook open to a page scrawled with queries. Thorn's pigments, curare confirmed in trace, parcel rattle, duplicate figurine. Laura's garden alibi, lane visibility unverified, Edith's sketches, twin pianist missing. The will loomed large, its clauses a map of motives. Laura's inheritance, a fortune in miniatures. Thorn's exclusion from the trust fund, a wound to pride. Edith's scholarly detachment, perhaps a facade for deeper stakes. And Dr. Fairchild, the suitor with lilies, Where did he fit? Craddock had wired for his statement. The young doctor was due at the station by noon. His posies no shield against scrutiny. A knock heralded Mrs. Phipps, bearing a tray of tea in trepidation. "Inspector, sir, Miss Bentley's abed, nerves all a-jangle. Miss Edith's in the study, penning wires to Devon. And Mr. Thorne's been seen at his shop, pacing like a caged fox." Craddock accepted a cup, the steam curling like a question mark. "Thorne's shop, locked tight yesterday, you said? Headaches?" "Aye, sir, shut by 3, curtains drawn. Mrs. Archer swears he was burning papers in his garden at dusk, smoke thick as sin." Her eyes gleamed with the thrill of tattling. "And that parcel, rattled, I'll swear, like bones in a bag. Not books, no Sir Craddock's pencil scratched. Thorne, burning documents, verify ash. Thank you, Mrs. Phipps. Keep Miss Bentley calm. We'll need her presently." As the housekeeper bustled out, Craddock's thoughts snagged on the parcel. A snuff-box, Thorne claimed, empty, delivered. Yet Phipps's bones in a bag echoed Miss Marple's musings, overheard at the vicarage. Porcelain limbs, a duplicate slipped in to replace the poisoned rogue. The attic search might clinch it, or unravel another knot. He glanced at the dollhouse, its facade a silent taunt. "You saw it all," he muttered half to himself. "If only walls could whisper." Across the village, in the vicarage's morning room, Miss Jane Marple sat with her knitting. A shawl of pale blue wool unfurling like a tide of intuition. The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced across the chintz curtains, and the air smelled of lavender from a bowl Mrs. Simmons had set on the mantel. The vicar's wife, her cheeks flushed from wrestling a batch of currant buns, settled opposite with a pot of Assam and a torrent of news. "Jane, the hall's still buzzing from yesterday. Mrs. Gribble's got curare as a witch's brew now, and young Timms the postman claims Thorne was at his window till 9, not 8. Liar or mistake? And Laura, poor lamb, fainted clean away when Edith snapped at her. That aunt's a harpy in tweeds." Miss Marple's needles clicked, a metronome to her thoughts. A harpy, dear, or a hawk guarding her eyrie? Miss Edith's sketches, precise as theorems, Mr. Crow said. And yet one figurine vanishes, a twin to the fallen. Curious, isn't it? Like a card palmed in a conjurer's trick. She sipped her tea, the cup warm as a confided secret. The inquest, such a stage. Faces betray, don't they? Thorne's pallor, Laura's flutter, Edith's steel, and Dr. Fairchild, absent, yet his lilies linger in Laura's heart. Mrs. Simmons leaned in, crumbs scattering. "Lilies, yes, dropped a bunch at the Higpeobda Grange this morning, bold as brass." Laura blushed crimson, but Edith shooed him off like a stray dog. "And Thorne? Mrs. Archer's tale of burning papers. What's he hiding, Jane?" "Secrets?" Miss Marple murmured, her eyes on the fire. "Like moths in a wardrobe, they nibble till the cloth gives way. Burning papers, receipts perhaps, or a supplier's note? I recall a case in St. Mary Mead. A grocer burned his ledgers, but the ash betrayed him. Arsenic receipts, tucked among the flour bills. Ashes speak, dear, if one listens." She rose, smoothing her skirt, and crossed to the window where the church spire pierced the clouds like a needle through silk. The village sprawled below, its roofs a patchwork of thatch and slate, each hiding its own small dramas. "I'll call at the Grange," she decided. "Laura needs a steady hand, and Edith, well, hawks watch closely, but sometimes miss the mouse at their talents." By 11, Miss Marple was at Willowbrook Grange, admitted by a subdued Mrs. Phipps. The hall echoed with the tick of a long-case clock, its pendulum a reminder of time's unyielding march. Laura emerged from her room, pale but composed, her muslin dress a ghost of morning white. "Miss Marple, how kind! Aunt Edith's in the study, sorting Uncle's papers. She's brisk today." "Briskness mends the heart," Miss Marple said gently, following Laura to the drawing-room. The dollhouses gleamed, their glass fronts reflecting her approach like accusing mirrors. She paused at the Regency model, its salon a study in arrested elegance, the chandelier's prisms frozen, the piano's keys silent. "This curtain," she noted, pointing to the lace askew. "Your uncle adjusted it, you said." "Last thing he touched." Laura nodded, her handkerchief twisting. "Yes, bare-handed, always. He loved the feel, said it brought the figures to life. That gentleman, the one that fell, he'd just set him at the piano tilting the hat. 'A rogue for the ladies,' he laughed." Miss Marple bent closer, her breath not quite touching the glass. "A rogue, indeed. And the set? 11 now? Not 12? The auction listed a dozen." Laura frowned, counting silently. 11, yes. The catalogue's in the study. Uncle marked it. But nothing's missing. He unpacked it all Friday. Missing, Miss Marple echoed softly. Or misplaced. Her mind turned to Edith's sketches. The twin figurine, a cuckoo in the nest perhaps, slipped in by a rival's hand. She straightened, smiling. "Let's see the catalogue, dear." Provenance tells tales. In the study, Edith Hargrove presided like a headmistress over a recalcitrant class, her desk buried under folios and envelopes. Her tweed suit was immaculate, her hair a steel grey helmet, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of fatigue. Or fear. "Miss Marple," she greeted, voice crisp as frost. "Come to knit us a solution." "Laura, fetch the catalogue. Blue cover, third drawer." Laura complied, producing a slim booklet stamped with the crest of Silas Grant's auction house. Miss Marple turned the pages, her finger tracing Hargrove's annotations. "Lot 47. Regency Townhouse, complete with 12 figures. Bristol porcelain, £250. R.H. Thorne bid £200, Hargrove had scrawled. Sore loser. She paused at the figurine list. Gentleman, top hat, at piano, unique, unglazed base for authenticity. Unique, Miss Marple murmured. Yet twins exist, don't they? Your sketches, Miss Hargrove. 2 pianists, you said. Edith's pen stilled. 2, yes, for Reggie's approval. 1 sent, 1 kept in Devon. The crate held only the auction's dozen. I checked the manifest myself last night. And the spare? Miss Marple's tone was mild, but her eyes were needles. Lost, likely, Reggie's chaos unpacking, or sold separately. Auction's fragment sets, Edith's voice hardened. You suspect me? I was in Devon. Train records prove it. Suspect? Miss Marple's smile was disarming. Oh, I suspect only human nature, dear. It weaves such intricate patterns. Envy, ambition, the quiet ache of exclusion. Your brother's trust fund. Artists over rivals, Mr. Crow said. A bitter pill for some, Edith snorted. Thorn, you mean? A weasel with a bidder's paddle. But poison? Beyond him, petty, not lethal, Laura interjected, voice quivering. Aunt, please, Mr. Thorn was kind despite the auctions. He and Uncle parted friends Friday. Friends shake hands, Edith retorted, and foes smile sweetest. Ask your suitor, Laura. Fairchild's lilies reek of motive. Reggie's will binds you till 30. A doctor's wages chafe under that yoke. Laura flushed, retreating to the window. Miss Marple observed the exchange. Her knitting resumed, a scarf now, its stitches a cipher of clues. Yokes chafe, she agreed, but love endures. or festers. Dr. Fairchild, has he called today? Left a note, Laura admitted, producing a slip from her sleeve. Lilies for courage. Meet me at the surgery, noon. RF. She crumpled it, eyes glistening. Uncle disapproved. He wanted me settled, not smitten. Miss Marple tucked the detail away, a bead on her thread. Fairchild. Suitor or schemer? The will's strings. Motive for a lover or a niece trapped in dependence? Craddock, meanwhile, had stormed the gilded trinket. Thorne's shop a dim cave of curios, where dust motes danced in slants of light. Thorne stood behind the counter, polishing a brass inkstand with unnecessary vigour, his face a mask of defiance. Inspector! Again? My attic's open. Search till doomsday. You'll find naught but cobwebs. Craddock's eyes roved the shelves, a Chippendale chair no larger than a teacup, a silver spoon the size of a pin. Your ash heap, Thorne. Mrs. Archer saw smoke. Burning what? Receipts or a vial's label? Thorne's rag stilled, his knuckles whitening. Rubbish. Old catalogues damp from the cellar. Fires quicker than the dustman. Smell the ash yourself. Nothing sinister. Craddock dispatched Griggs to the garden, where a blackened pile yielded charred paper fragments, a supplier's name, partial, Anical Imports London, and a date 3 weeks prior. Curare's sauce. He bagged the ash, his pipe flaring. Your order, Thorne. Vile shard in your bin. Curare extract. Explain. Thorne's jaw worked, a fish gasping on dry land. Specimen. For pigment tests, I swear. Discarded empty. Weeks ago. Someone's framing me. Laura, maybe, or that iron aunt. The will's hers, not mine. Framing. Craddock's voice was silk over steel. Or opportunity seized. You visit, distract with sherry, swap the figurine, duplicate from your shop, coated base. Reggie's bare hands do the rest. Thorne slammed the counter. Lies! I admired the rogue. Yes, watched him pose it. But swap? Never. My alibi's firm. Postman, 8, supper, alone. Tim says 9, Craddock countered, noting the flinch. Hours gap, Thorne. Enough to slip back, plant death. Thorne's eyes darted to the locked drawer. Craddock marked it. Search warrant by dusk, he warned, departing as the bell tolled mockery. At noon the inquest's echo lingered in the village hall, where stragglers dissected testimonies over lukewarm tea. Craddock interviewed Dr. Robert Fairchild in a back room, the young doctor a study in earnest disarray. Sandy hair askew, tie loosened, eyes red-rimmed as if sleep had eluded him. Laura's my heart, he confessed, hands spread. Hargrove forbade it. No fortune hunters, he called me. But poison? I'm a healer, Inspector. My vials hold salves, not savagery. Alibi? Craddock pressed. Surgery till late Friday. Patient's charts confirm. Home after, alone. Rid Keats till midnight. Craddock noted. Alibi. Verifiable partial. Motive. Will's restriction. Lilies today. Persistent, eh? For Laura, Fairchild said simply. She's caged. I'd free her. Back at the Grange, Miss Marple joined Laura and Edith for luncheon. Cold pheasant and quince jelly. Served by a silent Phipps. The talk turned to auctions. Edith's voice sharp. Reggie's folly! Outbidding Thorne like a knight tilting at windmills. Silas Grant, the auctioneer, wired me. Thorne stormed out, muttering pay dearly. Miss Marple's fork paused. Dearly indeed. Mr. Grant, accessible by telephone? His perspective might clarify Craddock, apprised by wire, arranged the call. Grant's voice crackled from London, a nasal drawl. Hargrove's win, £250 to Thorne's £200. Thorne livid, vowed revenge in jest. He'll rue that bid, he said. Left in a huff, but no poison talk. Figurines, 12, including the pianist. Unique, Bristol mark unique? Craddock echoed. No duplicates, none sold. Hargrove's crate sealed tight. My clerk packed it. Miss Marple, listening via the Granger's extension, smiled faintly. Sealed, yet opened. Crates are like hearts, tampered with in transit perhaps? Grant demurred. Possible. Carriers aren't saints. But my lot was clean. The call ended, leaving Craddock with a new thread. Tampering en route, or Thorn's slight at the Grange. He dispatched Griggs to the carrier's depot, seeking delivery logs. Evening fell, rain at last spattering the windows like tears withheld too long. Miss Marple lingered in the drawing-room, alone now, her knitting a shield against the gloom. She approached the Regency house, its facade a mask of innocence. "You saw?" she whispered to the empty salon. "A rogue swapped? A hand betrayed? But whose?" Her fingers hovered over the piano, not touching, never touching, yet feeling the chill of intent. Upstairs, the attic yielded a prize. Griggs emerged, dust-smeared, clutching a straw-filled box. Inside, nestled in velvet, lay a figurine, twin to the fallen, top hat identical, base unglazed. Craddock's pulse quickened. "Test it! Rush to London! If it's clean, we've our duplicate Thorn." Summoned again, stared at the find, face grey as the rain. "Not mine! Planted, I swear!" Edith, watching, scoffed. "Your shop's a trove, Percival. Spares aplenty Laura, silent, clutched her locket, its miniature a faint echo of the rogue. Fairchild, at his surgery, penned another note, undelivered. Miss Marple, back at the vicarage, unravelled a stitch, deliberate, corrective. "Echoes," she murmured to Mrs. Simmons, firelight gilding her face. "Auctions echo grudges, figurines echo twins, but the heart's echo, envy, love, betrayal, that's the loudest." Outside, rain drummed the downs, washing away ash, but not guilt. The crate's seal, the vial's shard, the locket's face, threads tightening, a noose for the unwary. Little Chipping held its breath, the auction's echo fading into a killer's silence. Chapter 6. The unveiling rain had settled over Little Chipping by the 5th morning, a soft, persistent drizzle that cloaked the village in a shroud of mist, as if the downs themselves wept for Reginald Hargrove's untimely end. The thatched roofs glistened like wet straw, and the lanes, slick with mud, mirrored the sky's sullen grey, a fitting backdrop for the unravelling of a mystery that had turned the village's heart from pastoral to perilous. In the drawing-room of Willowbrook Grange, where the dollhouses stood like silent jurors, the air held a chill not wholly attributable to the damp. The scent of beeswax polish lingered, but the acrid ghost of Curare, now a confirmed assassin, seemed to seep from the very walls, a reminder that beauty could conceal treachery as deftly as a velvet curtain hides a trapdoor. Inspector Dermot Craddock arrived at the Grange shortly after 9, his motor car skidding to a halt on the gravel drive, its tyres spitting pebbles like accusations. His face, usually sharp with purpose, bore the strain of sleepless nights. His pipe, a constant companion, was tucked cold in his pocket, for the morning's revelations demanded clarity, unclouded by smoke. The forensic report from London, delivered by courier at dawn, lay folded in his breast pocket, its contents a lit fuse. The duplicate figurine, unearthed from the attic's straw-filled box, was pristine, no trace of curare, its unglazed base as innocent as a child's prayer. This twin, identical to the poisoned rogue that had felled Hargrove, confirmed a switch. A sleight of hand, executed with murderous precision. The original, coated with death, had been slipped into the Regency dollhouse, the clean duplicate hidden away, a decoy to baffle the unwary. Craddock paced the drawing room, his boots leaving damp prints on the parquet. The Regency townhouse loomed on its table, its facade a mockery of elegance, pilasters gleaming, windows dark as secrets. He paused at the piano, where the poisoned figurine had stood, its absence a wound in the scene. The forensic chemist's note was unequivocal. The curare, masked in arrowroot starch, had been applied with care, likely with a brush finer than a squirrel's tail, to ensure adhesion without detection. Hargrove's bare hands, caressing the porcelain as was his wont, had sealed his fate in minutes, paralysis creeping like ivy, breath stilled before a cry could form. "Clever," Craddock muttered, his voice low as if addressing the dollhouse itself. "Too clever by half." His inquiries had tightened like a noose. Percival Thorne's pigment order, traced to a London supplier of ethnobotanical curios, included a vial of curare extract, labelled specimen only, but potent enough to kill a dozen collectors. The ash heap in Thorne's garden, sifted by Griggs's lads, yielded fragments of a burned label matching the vial's description, though Thorne swore it was discarded weeks prior. The rattling parcel, noted by Mrs. Phipps, pointed to the duplicate figurine, smuggled in, swapped during a moment's distraction. Laura Bentley's alibi, weeding in the garden with the gate ajar, held under scrutiny from the lane's passers-by, but her dependence on Hargrove's will cast a shadow of motive. Edith Hargrove, the iron-willed sister, had arrived too late for the crime. Train records confirmed her delay in Devon, but her sketches of the pianist figurine, one missing, suggested a deeper knowledge. And Dr. Fairchild, the suitor with lilies, remained a cipher. His surgery charts verified his presence till 8, but the hour's gap to midnight yawned like an unclosed door. Craddock summoned the players to the Grange at 10, his wire terse. "Drawing room, urgent." Attendance mandatory. The room, with its high ceiling and cherub-plastered cornices, felt like a courtroom awaiting judgment. The dollhouses, its mute. Witnesses Laura Bentley arrived first, her face pale as moonlight, her muslin dress clinging like damp gauze. Edith Hargrove followed, her tweed suit a fortress, her eyes scanning the room like a hawk over a field. Percival Thorne slunk in last, his cravat askew, his hands fidgeting, as if seeking the comfort of his shop's clutter. Elias Crowe, the solicitor, bustled in with his briefcase, his walrus moustache quivering with the importance of the moment. Dr. Fairchild, summoned from his surgery, stood at the periphery, his sandy hair dishevelled, his gaze fixed on Laura with a tenderness that bordered on defiance. Miss Jane Marple, invited by Laura's plaintive note, "Please, your calm steadies me," entered quietly, her basket of wools a shield of innocence. She settled in a corner armchair, her knitting needles clicking like a telegraph, transmitting secrets only she could decode. Her presence, unobtrusive as a shadow, drew no notice from the others, yet her eyes, those mild china blue orbs, missed nothing. Thorne's twitching fingers, Laura's knotted handkerchief, Edith's rigid spine, Fairchild's clenched jaw, Crowe's subtle cough. The room crackled with tension, a storm waiting to break. Craddock stood before the Regency dollhouse, his back to the group, his voice cutting the silence like a blade. "Ladies, gentlemen, a development. The figurine that killed Reginald Hargrove was no accident. Curare painted on its base, absorbed through his bare hands. A duplicate, clean, found in the attic, hidden in straw. A switch, planned with malice. One of you knows how and why. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Laura's hand flew to her throat, her eyes wide as saucers. Poison! Deliberate! Oh, Inspector, no! Thorne's face drained of colour, his lips parting in a soundless protest. Edith's brow arched, her expression a blend of scorn and curiosity. Fairchild stepped forward, voice tight. You're saying murder, sir? In this house? Murder, Craddock confirmed, turning to face them, his grey eyes storm dark. Timed between 7 and 9 Friday. Alibis fray. Miss Bentley in the garden, visible but unwatched. Mr. Thorne at home, postman's wave disputed. Miss Hargrove delayed in Devon. Train logs pending. Dr. Fairchild, surgery till 8, then solitude. Mr. Crow, your office overhears whispers of trusts and grudges. Motive abounds, the will, the auction, the trust fund that cut out rivals. Thorne surged to his feet, his voice a rasp. This is outrageous! My pigments, legitimate for miniatures. The vial, empty, discarded. That attic figurine, planted, I tell you. Someone's framing me, Laura, perhaps, or that doctor with his posies. Laura flinched, her handkerchief shredding. Me, Mr. Thorne, how dare you? Uncle was my world. His will, my burden, not my wish. Edith's laugh was a bark, sharp as a whip crack. Burden? A fortune in porcelain, child, and a manor to boot. Spare us the vapours. As for you, Percival, your shop's a rat's nest of spares. A duplicate's no stretch. Fairchild's fists clenched. Leave Laura be. Hargrove's rules chained her. My love's no crime. And Thorne, your envy's louder than your denials. Crow raised a placating hand, his moustache drooping. Enough! Reggie's death is tragedy, not theatre. No enemies, only rivals, as I told Miss Marple. Thorne's bluster at my office. Overheard, yes, but words, not deeds. Miss Marple cleared her throat. A soft sound like a curtain parting. All eyes turned to the corner, where her needles paused, the shawl a cascade of blue across her lap. Words, Mr. Crow, are the seeds of deeds, sown in anger, reaped in regret. This figurine, the rogue at the piano so charmingly described. A twin existed, per Miss Hargrove's sketches. One poisoned, one hidden. A switch requires access, opportunity, and knowledge. Of Mr. Hargrove's bare hands, of the dollhouse's arrival, of Curare's silent sting. Craddock nodded, seizing the thread. Precisely. Thorne, you visited Friday, 7 o'clock. Catalogue borrowed, voices raised. Miss Bentley heard, pay dearly. You carried a parcel, rattling per Mrs. Phipps. Not a snuff-box as claimed, too light. A figurine wrapped in brown paper, swapped while Hargrove fetched sherry from the sideboard. Thorne's face crumpled, his hands clawing the air. Lies! I admired the rogue, yes, watched Reggie pose it, bare as always. But swap? Never. My parcel was a gift, delivered gone. Check the client, Brighton Saturday. Craddock's eyes narrowed. Checked. Snuff-box empty, as you said, but the rattle, porcelain, not silver. And your ash heap, label fragments, Curare's mark. Your shop's order, vial diverted, false veterinary claim. Explain. Thorne staggered back, collapsing into a chair. I tested pigments, specimen only. Discarded empty, someone salvaged it, coated the figurine. Not me, Laura maybe, or Edith with her sketches. Edith's voice cut like a scalpel. Don't drag me into your mire, Percival. My sketches were for Reggie's art, not murder. I was in Devon. Train logs prove it. Laura, though, Her garden's no alibi. Gate ajar, lane empty, and Fairchild's lilies, motive in every petal, Laura sobbed, Fairchild stepping to her side. Enough! Laura's no killer. She loved Hargrove. I was at my surgery, charts logged. Accuse me, but leave her. Miss Marple's needles resumed, a soft click like a lock turning. Accusations like stitches must be precise, else the pattern phrase. Mr. Thorne's visit. Distraction, yes, but opportunity. The sherry moment. Reggie turns, you swap. You knew his habit, his trust fund sting. The will, overheard at Mr. Crow's. Artists favoured, rivals spurned. Envy, Mr. Thorne, is a brush dipped in poison. Thorne's voice broke, a torrent spilling. All right, I switched it. The figurine, mine, from my shop, a spare from a broken set. Coated it, yes, curare, from the vial. Reggie's gloating, my crown jewel, he called it, drove me mad. The trust fund, cutting me out. I overheard Crow's clerk blabbing. Planned it quick, knew he'd touch it bare hands, but I meant no death, a scare to ruin his prize. Craddock's hand closed on his shoulder, firm as justice. A scare. Curare kills Thorne. You painted death, knowing his touch. The attic twin, your decoy, hidden to muddle us. Thorne sobbed, head in hands. I panicked, hid it after. Thought he'd just sicken. Sell the house cheap, forgive me. Laura wept, Edith's face a mask of granite. Fairchild's arm encircled Laura, defiance in his stance. Crow coughed, papers rustling. Good Lord, Reggie, betrayed by a rival spite. Miss Marple folded her knitting, her smile serene. Spite, yes. Like a splinter in the heart. Small, but fatal. Dollhouses dream, Mr. Thorne, but envy wakes the nightmare. Constables led Thorne away, his protests fading into the rain. Craddock lingered, notebook shut. Your eye, Miss Marple, sharper than mine. The sherry distraction, how'd you know? She rose, basket in hand. Human nature, Inspector. In St. Mary Mead, a vicar's wife swapped a teacup for spite. Same slight, different stakes. Men turn for sherry, hearts turn for envy. The figurine spoke. In its silence, the Grange exhaled, its shadows softening. Laura, freed from suspicion, leaned into Fairchild's embrace. Edith gathered her sketches, lips tight. Crow bundled his papers, muttering of probate. Outside, the rain slowed, the downs gleaming like a promise kept. Miss Marple stepped into the lane, her brogue steady on the slick stones. The village lamps flickered, casting halos in the mist. Dreams and nightmares, she murmured, glancing back at the Grange. All in miniature, yet larger than life. Little Chipping settled, its secrets bared, its heart cleansed by truth's cold light. The dollhouses stood silent, their tiny worlds restored, save for one rogue, whose top hat now adorned a cell's grim tale.